Good morning, everyone. This is Bridget, and we're going to be virus testing a generic standard Phalaenopsis. This is just the type you would pick up at the grocery store or Trader Joe's or Walmart, and it's actually pretty well grown, regardless of the fact that it was probably labeled as an ice orchid. The leaves are nice and clean. I don't see any obvious signs of chlorotic markings, but it is something that we want to test just to make sure before we have it sitting on our benches. This one in particular is pretty nice, and I was hoping to use it as a possible breeding parent going forward. But before I do that, we have to run a little virus test. So today we are going to be using the Agdia ImmunoStrip testing, and it comes with a buffer solution bag, and then it comes with the sample strips, which is what actually does the testing. And the buffer solution in here is sealed inside of the plastic bag, and then it also has a kind of a mesh bag on the inside, and we're going to be putting our tissue sample in between those mesh layers to kind of macerate it, kind of grind up the tissue, and then we're going to be putting our strip down the channel on the side and allowing it to read the test. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open it up. We've already brought our test up to room temperature. These kits are generally stored in the refrigerator, and they recommend bringing them up to room temperature, which doesn't take very long in the greenhouse. So we just grab them as we're ready to use them, and they come up to temperature pretty quick. Go ahead and sit it there so that none of the solution wants to fall out. And when you are getting samples, you want to use a clean, unused, sterile razor blade so that you can dispose of it afterwards, just in case there was a problem, but also it makes the nicest, sharpest cut. The plant that we have, generally we recommend taking a sample from the newest mature leaf, which would be this top leaf here. However, this leaf is still kind of soft, and in case there's a problem cutting into this really soft tissue and it causes a problem later, I am going to go for the last mature growth, which is this one here. This one's probably formed about 6 months ago. And what we're going to do is we are going to cut the tip of this leaf off, just a nice smooth cut straight across, and then you can add cinnamon to the edge of the cut on the edge of this leaf if you're worried about any fungus or bacteria making its way in. And then we're going to take this leaf and we are just going to cut a little section of it out. And we're going to use a piece about this big. If you look at the instructions, it talks about how much dilution of sample to buffer solution you're going to need. And it recommends 0.15 grams of leaf floral or root tissue. Now, we don't have a scale that accurate for that small of amount that we can use in our greenhouse. What we've done over the years is we've done a lot of sample testing in our lab so that we can kind of eyeball it now, but this is the first time you're doing it. You're going to want to be a little more precise, and you'll need to get yourself a small lab scale. You can grab those off at eBay or Amazon. They're not usually that expensive. Different leaves have different thicknesses. This is a phale leaf, and it's moderately thick, but say you were doing it on Cymbidium leaf, it would be something that weighs very little, and you would need to use a larger amount of tissue. If you were using a Brassavola nodosa leaf or a Brassavola digbyana leaf, of course those are much thicker, and you'll end up using a lot less tissue. You don't want to use too much tissue in your sample, otherwise you'll end up getting a false positive or even a false negative. So we're going to take this little bit of tissue, we are going to open up our sample bag right here, we're going to drop it down inside, not the razor blade obviously. You can see our little bit right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully, we're going to kind of hold up the end here so we don't slosh any of it. We're going to use the end of our clippers, and we're just going to kind of grind that mesh into the solution. And what it does is it gets all the fluids out of it. You want to do this very gentle so that you don't cause too many bubbles or foam. Otherwise you'll have to wait a good while for it to settle. You don't want that foam creeping its way up the buffer solution stick. But you can see it's kind of a light green. Probably see it better down here. It's a bit of a light green, not too heavy. And then we're going to take our sample stick, which is, this is the sample kit for Cymbidium Mosaic Virus and Odontoglossum Ringspot Virus. You always want to hold it from this end of the strip, and this is the end that's going to go actually inside the buffer solution. And we're going to bring it up just to about that little line. We're going to slide that down in there just enough to submerge the tip of the test kit. And you don't want it to go too high up the sides, because the reagent that's inside that strip, if the fluid gets to that reagent in the wrong order, it can actually cause false positives on the kit. There are different ways to get test kits that read different ways, but this one, it has the basic control line. On a negative result, you're only going to see the one line and no bottom lines here. This is what the positive test results are going to look like. You're going to have your control line, and then you have a possibility of having one or two positive lines. You have the Odontoglossum Ringspot test line and the Cymbidium Mosaic test line, and those would show what the positives are. Now, if you get test results that have positive lines or no lines, but do not have the control line, then you need to rerun with a new test and a new test strip. It can mean that there wasn't the right amount of tissue in there to counteract the buffer solution. It could have been too much, could have been too little. One thing you should also make sure of is that these lines actually show up on the pinkish red coloring. If they come out green, then what you're getting are chlorophyll markings showing up on your test lines, and those would not be precise. Those would not be accurate tests. So if you have to redo it, you'll have to take a new bit of sample and get a new test kit. And we are waiting. Usually we can get an answer within the first 5 minutes, and so far so good. We already see our control line here at the top. It's still a little muddy down here, but as the reagent is pulled towards the top of the test strip, this will clear up and become more of a white coloring. But so far I do not see either the Cymbidium Mosaic test or the Odontoglossum Ringspot test line. So far so good. And as long as it stays looking like this for the next 20 or 30 minutes, then I think we can safely say this plant is testing clean at this time. And just remember, just because a plant tests clean now doesn't mean you're in the clear. Sometimes plants that are suspect or have symptoms should be retested again within 6 months to see if the teeter level changes. Also, if you are worried about insects or other vectors of virus, thrip, cockroaches, slugs, all those things can take a bite from a diseased plant and then go take a bite off of another plant. And of course, you want to make sure you're using clean cutting tools. So as long as this stays looking this good, I think we're safe to say we can use this plant for breeding next time it blooms.